Hi, welcome to another edition of the Pulse Podcast. We're excited to have Dr. Bryan Gee here in studio with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, could you just explain your position here at RMU and give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I am the chair of the Department of Occupational Therapy and then the director of the entry-level Doctor of Occupational Therapy program here at RMU. I've been an occupational therapist for about 23 years. Primarily my area of practice clinically is pediatrics, but I've been an educator for about 14, 15 years working in higher education.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about one of your passion projects with pediatric OT. Could you just give us a brief overview of what occupational therapy with pediatrics is?
Yeah. So with kids, and it spans from your infants and the NICU, so the NICU, all the way through when they transition out of high school, at age 21. Our primary, job or what we do with these kids or clients is, we're working on and using meaningful activities to help them do the things that they want and need to do. For a child, their primary occupation, there's two really, is to play. That's their job, and the other one is to learn. And so those are kind of the things that we help them navigate in addition to then taking care of themselves.
So today we wanted to discuss occupational therapy and religious participation for children and youth with disabilities, which is an interesting topic that I'd never thought about before.
Yeah.
How did that come about for you?
So like I said, I've been a pediatric OT for about 23 years, and a lot of the clients that I was working with, that was always one of the things that came up as a part of the evaluation intake was common was having to navigate and help them navigate church. And it was just it was probably 50% of the time that always came up as a concern or something they wanted to see their child improve. And we would reach out to individual organizations, religious organizations, saying, hey, this is a free service that we can provide as a part of a student clinical practicum. And so we had protocols and for the families, and then protocols that we would navigate with the staff and clergy.
Yeah, I mean, even just any kid is kind of, you're cognizant of like how if he's going to start screaming or walking up the aisle or throwing Cheerios at somebody else, and, or get mad at you for stealing his Cheerios.
Exactly.
So I can see that could be like a huge service to a family, and I'm curious about the reception of the clergy and how you involve them. Yeah, 'cause it seems like you probably want to alert them, hey, we're doing this.
The only way it works is you really have two clients. You have the family and the child, and then you have the organization. And the only way it works is if both are involved and want to do it. But in order for it to get to work, you've got to have everybody on the same page and willing to say, okay, we have this child, and they have this impairment or this disability that's preventing them and the family from doing what they want to do. In religious organizations, they want people to come. Right. Otherwise they wouldn't have spaces for that. So generally they want to be a part of it, but do they have then the additional support to execute it? We'll set up a meeting, and I'll meet with them, and you'll come with, and this is what I want to do, and this is why, this is how I can help, and then we get that buy-in, and then I show up, or my students, we show up and we just watch and see what's the culture and the flow of the religious activities where the child may be having difficulty. And we don't intervene or anything. We just watch. What kind of supports are there? What does the environment have? What are the other kids doing? What is kind of the staff available to do? What are the demands being placed on the other children and then the child in question? So we're really kind of looking at three things. We're looking at the social and physical environment in which those activities occur. We're looking at the tasks that the child is expected to engage in. So if it's like, sitting still or singing a song or listening or, coloring on, whatever it is, we look at the task, and then we also look at, well, what is this child even capable of doing based upon their developmental level or, physical, emotional, or social capacity. And then we put that into kind of, we evaluate all those things, and then we start making recommendations. to both groups. So this is what mom and dad, this is what you guys need to do. And then clergy and staff, here's what we think you can do to help minimize the barriers for participation. And we give them tools, and then we help them implement, see how that goes, and then we come back and reevaluate and give other ideas, or just kind of let it run if it's working. And then the other piece is educating the general congregation. This is the child, and they may have a diagnosis, and if they have a diagnosis, then we try to educate them. This is what cerebral palsy is, or this is what autism is, or this is what Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is. Whatever it is, this is what it is, and this is how they present, and this is what they can do. And then this may be why they behave a certain way, so they understand that the child's not trying to be disruptive or create problems. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So part of it's to sensitize the congregation. This is what it is, and this is, if you know more about the why and what things are, it's much easier to be empathetic, and then really be willing to extend and help out, right? But more often than not, the community, religious community, it doesn't matter what denomination, the religious community, based upon the values that they have, typically buy in. It's like, we really want this to work. What do we need? Here's the resources we have. And then we help then decide, this is what's reasonable, and then this probably isn't. Right? The best thing that I can think of is when you evaluate a Catholic Mass, and what's the physical procedure that happens in order to participate. Well, and I always ask the question, well, does the child or the client need to stand up and down that many times, right? We're looking at how can we adjust that so that the congregation and clergy feel comfortable with them participating at the level that they can, and that the family feel like they're still doing what they can do, right? Because as parents, it's like, I want them to do all of this stuff. And
right.
It's like, well, maybe they can't, and that's okay.
So is this uniquely something that you've done, or is that
this is something that I've done? No,
this
is something that I've done here in the Intermountain West, but with kids, it's a little harder. Again, because you're navigating a few things. You're navigating severity of the condition. You're navigating the culture of the family. Some cultures, if they have a child with a disability, that can be a reflection. Sometimes they perceive that as a reflection of them being a poor parent. You're navigating that. But there hasn't been a truly operationalized, from my perspective, of how to do this, in a more systematic way. It's been more just kind of like, let's see what works best for, the communities. As a clinician, if you're going to do it, you're doing it as a value added. And it's just, you're doing it on your own time. There isn't really a formal protocol per se. Outside of going into the setting, right? So let's say I'm working and I'm, billing and doing all that stuff. And let's say I don't have the resources to go into their setting. What I do then say is, okay, mom, dad, grandma, the caregiver, please video, because everybody has a smartphone now, video your child in that setting, and especially when it's a challenging interaction or something happening, so that then I can see it, and I can provide and develop strategies in the clinic that either I'm going to replicate, simulate in the clinic with, between myself and the child, involving the parents, or I might involve other clients that are in the clinic to kind of do things. So that way then I can work on generalizing things. Well, we can't do this to Billy because that hurts, or you can't say this, right? Because it's inappropriate. Then I can generalize it to other settings outside of just what's happening in the clinic, if that makes sense. So if you can't do that, then you're trying to see what tools do I have in the clinical setting where then, I'm going to practice on, social interaction or, tolerating sounds, right? The organ or whatever. I can replicate that in the clinic and then help them, gradually transition that or generalize it to what's happening on a Sunday or a Saturday in a different facility or structure.
Well, I love this concept. It's kind of a little bit out of the box, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you have an example or two of a success story.
Yeah, and we had this client, and that was one of the concerns that came up was church. And And it wasn't a part of the recommendation. I just happened to grab Mom and said, hey, if you want help at church, this is what I can offer, but it's got to include students, and this is when I can do it, right? It's got to wait. I'm going to wait till the end of the semester or whatever. It's busy. And so that's what we did is we had our occupational therapy evaluation that we did, and we looked at, she carried a diagnosis of moderate autism. And so she was on the spectrum, and she was verbal and she was fun, but behavior was a challenge in a structured way. And the challenge with church is it only happens once a week, where other things happened every day, multiple times a day. So the structure and the sequence of events was always a challenge for her because it was always like a reset. The other challenge she had that we were navigating, and this did come up, was she would run away from the building. She would escape.
Oh boy, we've got a runner.
She would escape, right? And that happens a lot. We call that elopement, and that happens a lot. So it was a concern by Mom. We're really struggling with this, and the clergy and staff were struggling as well, and they wanted some help. So we went. I went in and observed, sat in. Where they had communion, I sat in there and for an hour and just sat back and watched, took notes, like an anthropologist, And then I sat in where they separate, the adults to the children, and at the time there were 2 hours for the kids away from Mom and Dad, and so I sat in on the classroom as well as the larger group of kids, and just kind of took notes, and then I met with everyone, and here's my report. This is what I found. Here's what's working. And then here's the opportunities. It was never here's what's wrong. None of them were therapists and that sort of thing. So I sat down and, each kind of event, here's what I would recommend. Do this in this environment. And it was recommendations for Mom and Dad during, the communion kind of setting. And then when they depart, then it was, okay, here's what this is what she needs in order to be successful. We're trying to prevent elopement. She needs a buddy. And the buddy can be someone else in that youth age, that younger age, but is okay with being with her and helping her, making sure get to class and stay there. And this person is, again, going to be her buddy, just to provide cues and prompts and redirect. But the biggest thing that this client needed was she needed a job.
Oh.
And so that was my major recommendation, was when she's with the small group of kids or the larger group, she needs jobs. And that kept her on task, occupied, and was a part of it.
So a parent or a member of the clergy that's interested in participating in this, how would they go about doing that?
So, this is the challenge or the opportunity. The best place to start would be, any university or college that has an occupational therapy or occupational therapy assistant program, to see, hey, this is the concern we have, there's the need. Where can you send me? And it may be, hey, we can help you out because we have students, or it may be, hey, we have clinical sites that they may be able to help you. That's always the first place to start. But then, more often, or just finding, pediatric occupational therapists in your area and reaching out to those clinics to say, hey, here's my concern, and this is one of them in addition to other things. We're struggling with this at school or in the community, but we're also struggling with this in the community, particularly when we go to church. And that's the route, I guess you could say. There's not a formal referral system or specialty area for this. It's one of the it's natural for us to do it as OTs. And that's why I think it's easy for pediatric OTs to do it. It's just how do you fit it in with your schedule and which clients, to do it with. Granted, the bottom line, of course, there's who wants it, number one, because not everybody's going to want it. But those that do, it's how do we fit it into the plan of care. And
I like what you're saying off air, and it's the essence of healthcare, really, is you're finding a unique solution to a problem. And I think it's really awesome.
It's I'm biased, but with kids, like I said, their job is to learn and to play. That's their job. And if I can, my job is to help them do that job. And I do that through really kind of three things, whether it be addressing religious participation or addressing self-care or social skills or making friends or, engaging in Cub Scouts, whatever it is, one of my focuses is I'm going to try to, how can I improve the child's skills? their skill set? What can I do to improve that? And then the other place I look is, well, how can I adjust the task to ensure success? And if they experience success more often, they're more likely to participate, right? None of us do anything if we fail all the time. So we're always looking for this just right challenge. We're adjusting the task so that they can be successful, and then we make it a little bit harder, that sort of thing. Or I'm looking at how can I modify the social environment, the attitudinal environment, or the physical environment. And that's really a lot of what we do when we go in and try to enhance participation in religious settings is I don't have enough time to address kind of the factors of the client, but I do have time to say, do you need to do all of those steps or all of those things to participate where everybody's happy? Maybe I can take one thing out of it. Do they really need to stand up in the front? Or do you guys really need to sit next to the organ, right, where it's too loud? And then, what can I do to adjust the social environment, like who they engage with? Maybe they engage with fewer people so they don't get overwhelmed. Give them a buddy, maybe it's that. And then the attitudinal environment, how can I change the culture of that this child with, a difference or an impairment or a disability, their value as a member of the congregation is just as valuable as that other person, right?
I love that.
Yeah, so...
What are your hopes for this?
Well, the biggest thing is a lot of it's awareness, right? And giving therapists tools to say, yeah, I can do this, and here's who I would want to do it with. There's that as, I didn't think I could do it this way, and sometimes we're thinking we've got to solve the problem for every child. And like I said, if you can solve the problem for one, then you give that organization the tools to solve it for more than one that it may even not even be your client, right? So there's that. And then there's awareness to the consumer that this is an option. This is a value added skill that occupational therapists have, that even from a consultation standpoint, they could take advantage of. It doesn't even have to be a direct service. It's like, hey, do you have any strategies for me when, we're doing this on, at church during the week or on Sunday or Saturday, and we're doing this? How would, things are working in the clinic. How can I make it work here? So it's just expanding the scope without saying I've got to change everything and solve an entire problem. How can I address these one or two little things? And sometimes it's just like, you throw a pebble into a pond, and those waves reverberate very far, a lot farther than we realize. Our impact is pretty significant. So even if I can, you give a caregiver or a family tools so that the child sits still, can sit still for 30 minutes, that may change how they identify as a family, because I now can do this.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any resources that you'd recommend for therapists or families, maybe faith leaders?
For therapists, the therapists have the tools. It's just it's just mindset. It's like that's the biggest thing. Is we have the tools. Don't get locked into saying I've got, if you can't go into the setting, have the setting come to you. Mom, dad, video the challenging interactions or what's happening. Show me this. Even if it's like a physical space that they're struggling to access. Maybe it's that, because maybe I can modify the wheelchair so that they can navigate it, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just bring it to me and I can look at it during our session. And then vice, so the OTs have the tools. It's just giving yourself the space to address it. And you're not going to be able to address it with every client, but the ones that are motivated. And like I said, the motivation really has to be with the family and the family really, and then the organization. If it's just the family and the organization is resistant, that can be tough. If the organization is motivated, it's much easier to get the family on board, right? Because then that's one less barrier they have to navigate amongst all these other barriers within the community that they're navigating that can be a challenge. And then for families, it's okay to ask and just ask, hey, is this something you can help me with? If you can't, who would you recommend? Sometimes we just don't ask. We only do OT in this, we only do it this way. We're only going to address these things. And we get kind of stuck in that. And families will do that as well. So they've had OT for a long time. We only do self-care, and we only do sensory. But we do all those things in multiple settings, right? School, the locker room, Cub Scouts, the movie theater, the grocery store, church, that sort of thing. So a lot of it's just, and that's the biggest thing, is just ask. Great. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing about that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about that topic?
The biggest thing is for therapists, and this is what's important for the consumer to know, is if therapists are really good at this, we're really good at it, but we are very hesitant to address it unless you initiate it. It's like, if it's a challenge for you, and if you're having a hard time doing these things at home or at work or whatever, it's likely going to be hard in this setting as well. But we're very respectful of that, as we don't want to assume. So that's why I say, speak your mind and say where, what you're struggling with and where you're struggling with it, and then we can address it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
We've reached what's called the rapid fire round, where I give you a quick question and you give me an even quicker answer, just off the top of your head. Yeah, we're putting you under the gun here. So, early bird or night owl?
I am an early bird.
Favorite OT tool or gadget you can't live without?
Neither. It's play. My tool is whatever the child likes to do. Transformers, right? Or Halo.
Oh, I like that too. That's great. Yeah. If you weren't in OT, what would you be doing?
I would be a meteorologist.
One word your students would use to describe you?
Silly and playful.
Favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Bike ride.
Best advice you've ever received?
Be yourself.
Favorite book or podcast?
The all-time favorite book is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Podcast right now is The Daily Stoic.
And if you could instantly become an expert in something else, what would it be?
Robotics.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Bryan Gee, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight and expertise.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we hope to have you soon. Have a good bike ride and have fun playing with the kids.
Thank you.
All right. Please join us again next time.